This tiny little unique lens might be one of the lenses that I have had most fun shooting with recently. It is the new Lumix 100mm f2.8 macro, and it really offers you the chance to be able to go out and create something very different. And that's something that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on, because it's something I want to see more of in other lenses going forward. If I do sound a little bit croaky, by the way, I woke up feeling a little bit hoarse, a little bit of a sore throat. At the time of making this video, the 100mm is the smallest and lightest macro lens available, and it is genuinely tiny. It's the same size as all of the other Lumix S primes, which is incredible because macro lenses do tend to be on the larger and heavier side of things. This is just tiny, look at that. And that's great, because if you were to stick it on a gimbal and chop and change between other S primes, you're not going to have an issue because they are all the same size and weight, or roughly the same size and weight. There's barely any difference between them. There is a whole newly developed dual phase linear motor inside of this thing, which I don't particularly know what that means. It goes straight over the top of my head, but I believe it was developed specifically for this lens, and it is silent for video, which is great for obvious reasons, but it also means that it is very quick to focus. One area that macro lenses tend to struggle with is autofocus, especially focusing on something that's far away in the distance and then trying to rack focus to something close, because there is a lot of glass to move around inside of those lenses and a huge focus distance. This though does actually cope really well, but on top of that, to be able to assist with that, there is also a focus limiting switch, which means that you can choose your focus distance from the full focus distance, half a meter, or to within half a meter. So that means that if you are focusing on something really close up and you're going for those tight macro shots, it's not going to be looking at the whole area for autofocus. It's just going to be focusing its attention on that key area so that it's much quicker and it can lock on to whatever it is you're trying to focus on. And when you pair it with the phase detect autofocus that the S5 II and the S5 IIX give you, it genuinely works really well. And while we're talking about focus, the 100mm also copes really well with focus breathing, and it's something that we've come to expect from Lumix lenses recently, and I think it's something that more camera manufacturers should take into account, because it means that you're not getting any of that horrible warping effect around the edges of the frame when you are changing your focus, which is great for video because it's less distracting, but it is also really useful in photography as well, because when you are shooting macro, you might want to be focus stacking, and if you are getting focus breathing, that might affect how you later go on to stack those photos when you're editing. So no focus breathing, that's a big win. I've used this lens for both photo and video, and it's been a lot of fun to use, because I'll be honest, when I first saw it announced, I was a little bit skeptical. I wasn't 100% convinced. I thought it might be a little bit limiting having a 100mm prime, thinking it might be okay for one or two shots here and there, but I'm not going to use it a whole lot. But it's honestly way more versatile than I ever thought it would be. The f2.8 aperture allows you to get some really nice smooth background blur and bokeh, and while the fact that it is an f2.8 instead of a 1.8 like the other S primes, that really isn't an issue, because when you are shooting things like portraits, you're getting even more compression than you are at the likes of 35 or 50mm, and when you're shooting macro, getting those nice close-up shots, your depth of field is so shallow anyway that you really don't need f1.8, especially when you're at the minimum focus distance 20 centimeters. Talking about focus distance, I love the attention to detail on this lens as well, because the text on the front is all grayed out in a similar way as it is on the S5 IIX, unlike the text on the front of the other lenses. And that is great, because when you are shooting those close-up macro shots, you can potentially get reflections in things like eyes, for example, and this just helps to reduce that as much as it possibly can. It's the little things. I love the innovation and attention to detail that Lumix are showing at the moment, and bringing out gear that gets people talking and provides as much value as it does. As I mentioned before, this lens just gives you something a bit different, and I like that because it offers you a completely unique perspective that you don't often see, especially in videos, and the fact that it is so small and light and quick to autofocus just means that it is opening up so many possibilities to be able to take this with you anywhere and everywhere and add in different elements to your videos and your storytelling. It just makes it so much more accessible. Don't just have to use it for macro shots either. You can use it for portraits or landscape photography and isolate different parts of the scene, which is why this lens is so versatile. I really want to see more lenses doing something a little bit different going forwards, because these days all lenses are great. They all take great photos, they're all sharp, they all autofocus, but they're all usually just a little bit boring. But it's because of that I'm really interested in actually looking at vintage lenses to put on my Lumix cameras, things like the Helios 442, because it just gives you a really unique look and feel to your footage and your photos that you don't often get nowadays. But that's for another video entirely. What I'm trying to say is that I like that this lens just offers you something a little bit different. So let me know your thoughts on the 100mm macro in the comments down below, and if you want to know more about another one of my favourite lenses, I recommend you watch this video next, and I will see you there. What do you think to this new hoodie? Is it not like the coolest thing you've ever seen? 36 exposure Kodak, and get that. I'm such a geek.